Welcome to the Beyond the Horizons podcast, where we delve into and expand upon some of the key issues raised in the Enable 2024 MSP Horizons report, produced in conjunction with Canalys. In this episode, Stefanie Hammond steps into the hot seat to talk to Enable's head security nerd Lewis Pope about how MSPs can take advantage of the growing opportunity compliance as a service offers the industry.
Welcome, everyone, to this latest edition of Beyond the Horizon podcast. If you are familiar with this podcast series, you know that this podcast is typically hosted by my colleague, Pete Roythorn. You probably noticed I'm not him. My name is Stefanie Hammond. I am one of the head nerds here at Enable. Stepping in this week to interview one of my favorite head nerd colleagues, Lewis Pope. He is our resident expert on all things security and compliance related. And so we're going to be speaking to Lewis today, get his insights on, how can MSPs get started with compliance as a service? Now, I'm here because this is something that I really did want to chat with Lewis about. I'm currently in the middle of developing some new training material on this particular topic, because this is how I see kind of the evolution of security. And I think, Lewis, you would probably agree. Every MSP should be offering and selling security to their customers, full stop. So the new question now becomes, how do I continue to stay relevant? How do I still be needed and in the eyes of my customer? And how do I reposition my MSP to better differentiate my business and my services from all the other MSP competitors in the space? According to the Enable Horizons report that we did do in conjunction with Canalys research firm, they cited that there's 335,000 companies globally today providing some sort of managed services type of offering. So with all of this competition, how does an MSP really work to get themselves to stand out? And how can they be successful in winning over new clients? And I think compliance and compliance management is that next big service that businesses they're going to be needing it, and they're going to be turning to you as their MSP looking for that. And I think those MSPs that can really pivot and begin offering services around compliance, risk management, compliance management, those are going to be the ones that are going to continue to grow exponentially. And they're the ones that are going to be able to keep winning new clients and stealing them from other MSPs who aren't having this type of conversation. So long preamble, but very excited to be able to pick Lewis's brain today on this topic, because our goal for Enable, our job as head nerds, is to help MSPs really move in this direction. So thank you, Lewis, and welcome to Pete's Beyond the Horizon podcast.
Thank you, Stefanie, for the introduction. And this is my first time on the Horizon, so enjoyable first time for me here.
Excellent. You don't even get Pete first time on his podcast. You don't even
No.
get him to interview you. So lovely. All right. So, Lewis, I obviously care very much about compliance. You obviously care very much about compliance. Why should MSPs care about compliance?
Few reasons. First and foremost is probably just the fact that the MSP landscape has changed. The dynamics of the world we exist in have changed. And it's no longer that your clients are going out and hunting for people to help with computer problems. They are hunting for people to help them with cybersecurity issues, regulatory problems, business case problems, compliance. So, just for the simple fact of, if you're still operating as a traditional MSP from 7 years ago, maybe even only 4 years ago, you're missing out on the new market growth. So, just from the business perspective, there's a huge opportunity here that you're going to miss out on if you're not prepared to take advantage of it. Then and that's from new acquisition for new clients to upselling into your current client base, and also potentially opening up new regulated industries as targets for you to support.
Right.
Because one of the biggest challenges, or one of the biggest benefits that comes out of deciding I'm going to start handling compliance, is you start learning more. You start connecting more dots between just not just the operation side of things, but the operation side, security side, business outcome side, because all of those things are interdependent upon each other. And whenever you add compliance into the mix, it becomes much more structured and regimented. And whenever something becomes more structured and regimented, typically that means you're also introducing benefits, operational efficiencies, better ways of the business that you are supporting here. Because in the end, keep in mind, as an MSP, what you are facilitating is your client's abilities to operate and run a business successfully, and bringing in compliance, not just for the lofty goal of we're going to follow compliance, therefore you're going to be more secure, but also we're going to follow compliance and we're going to make your business operate better. It's getting back a little bit to the roots of the old days of, um, we didn't have MSPs back in the day. We were business consultants, we were computer consultants, software development consultants. Um, and getting back to some of those roots here can really take you forward in the compliance game, because you're starting to own more of the whole of the relationship of what your clients do with you. But also, you start owning a little bit more of how your clients' businesses operate, which gives you the benefit of, hey, I can start steering my clients more. And I know you love to absolutely talk about the value of QBRs, and this falls into that as well. By doing this, it is something you will be servicing and talking about in QBRs. And those are your opportunities to steer your clients where you want them to go. You are not a passenger along for the ride. And if
No,
you do consider yourself to just be a passenger along for the ride, it's time to change your perspective.
you're going to be kicked out of the car very soon by another MSP. All right. So, how does an MSP then even get started in, CaaS, this compliance as a service? Like, it's not as if, I'm going to wake up this morning. I use this analogy all the time. I'm going to, go to Walmart and get me some CaaS. Like, how does an MSP, if they acknowledge that this is a road they want to go down, how do they get started with it?
So I think the first there's a couple of practical questions to answer for yourself first internally, based on your knowledge of how your MSP operates. First is just get into the, can we do this for ourselves? You have to sit down and have that honest discussion with, internally, with your internal stakeholders, with your resources, with your, everybody from down to help desk all the way up to your network engineers, your security analysts, incident responders, whoever you have on the team. You need to have that honest discussion of what are our capabilities and what new burdens can we take on. And I always challenge MSPs to do it for yourself first. If you can't pick a compliance or a framework and follow that and implement it for yourself internally, you're going to have no hope of doing it well and at scale in a profitable manner for your clients. So you kind of have to first, have that honest resource limitations conversation with yourself, so you can figure out, you know, what are the viable frameworks or compliances that we could pursue and support. Um, High trust, which is for clients, for environments that are going to be HIPAA regulated. High trust is a great framework. If you are supporting clients that are in medical and you have not cracked open the first thing about high trust, there's your homework. Go learn. But you need to be able to take that, look at it, and be able to implement whatever it's calling for internally. Because in order to implement compliance as a service, you have to be able to take the entirety of a business and correct the deficiencies that exist. So practice with yourself, because as you build out your services aligning to one of these, your business processes may have to change. And if you can't work through that yourself in a way that's going to make you stay profitable, even whenever you're forced to change how your business operates, what hope are you going to have to be able to go to a client, make them change how their business operates? And, budgets are always a concern, and you have to be able to do it at a point, at a margin that you're going to accept and that they're going to accept. So
So
get your
this
house in order
concept,
first.
I was just going to say that. Get your house in order first, right? Okay.
Yep. And then you have to develop you have to get everybody on board with it. Your help desk has to understand that business as usual has changed. You can't just go in and fix a thing. It is now no, we have to start being concerned about a proper process of triage and investigation and digital forensics data preservation practices. MSPs have been great and are wonderful at the job of the thing is broken, find the broken thing, fix the broken thing, get it back into production. But that's falling short of a lot of principles you need to reinforce and practice and live by whenever it comes to compliance. Because there will be some compliances, and there are so many of them, but there will be compliances where you absolutely positively need to preserve evidence. And that's a scary thing for some MSPs to be involved in. Like, I don't want any responsibility or any involvement in those kinds of things. And that is an opportunity for you to do that self assessment. Do we want to get into this game? Because it will require you to change how you operate as an MSP. And that's going to have all kinds of knock on effects with, you may end up
Yeah.
having team members that have been great team members and productive individuals in your old structure, but in the new structure, they might actually be harmful. They've been doing things that way for many years. They know it works, and now you're telling them to do it a different way. They may push back and fight a little bit. So there'll be those internal conflicts too.
Oh gosh, how does an MSP manage that?
Yeah, that's whenever, yeah, people management skills. It's used to be the thing they hammered into me whenever I was going through my engineering schooling, was how important soft skills and communications between individuals can be. It doesn't matter that you can technically execute on a technical challenge. It's how do you work with others? How do you interact? Are you good at taking criticism and feedback and being told what you're doing is not in alignment and you must stop and you must change how you do it and you have to do it this whole new way, even though it takes you longer and it has steps that you don't think are necessary. Um, and that will be a thing where you might, I don't want to say you have to demote people, but you may have to change roles. Take that person that's fighting you on this cultural change in the company and putting them into something that's going to, match better for what they're fighting you on. Usually
Yeah.
they're fighting you against you or the changes for some good reasons. Listen to what they're saying and take the feedback and figure out if it is legitimate. If it is you know what, you are correct. We are using a modern EDR solution. So why do we need to do weekly virus scans on endpoints? Because, well, the EDR solution's been running there 24/7 all the time. Any new data that's written to the drives is automatically getting evaluated. Anything that goes through the CPU through memory is being evaluated. So, really, what was the value in us spending the 5 hours, 6 hours, 10 hours a week of somebody's time running around and making sure that manual scans of disk are being kicked off and that you have those for auditing purposes? So, it is a business decision, but it's also, you have to know the technology that underlines what you're trying to do, because sometimes the better ways that we have of doing things that are offered to us by new platforms, new tools, modern solutions, they may not align with what the actual, word for word, what is asked for in a compliance. But you got to have the confidence and the knowledge to be able to say that's fine because we are exceeding that.
Right. I kind of equate this to, 20 years ago, MSPs that were converting from like a break fix time material shop into, that managed services model. Like I remember, I've been around a little while, really working with MSPs and our partners around that cultural shift in terms of having the right employees that can understand that the break fix model is not what we want anymore, that we're moving over to this, monthly recurring revenue model. Is this kind of that next evolution? I see that as kind of be the next evolution of a cultural shift of an MSP, taking it from we're just doing our regular managed services today, but going back to, how do we differentiate? How do we make ourselves stand out from our competitors, moving into the compliance management space?
There is always the drive to go and look for a single point solution of I'm going to go consume this product, this service, this tool, I'm going to bring it in, everybody's going to train on it, they're going to start using it and everything's fine. And that's been the flow for a lot of things in the MSP space over the years. Tooling gets better, it gets commoditized, multiple features gets rolled into one, and what used to be three different tools now becomes one platform. And compliance as a service is going to take a similar path, but I think there's going to be some significant differences because, well, compliance involves so much business in it. It really does uh, dictate how a business has to operate, where usually what MSPs traditionally offered in services was in service of however the business currently operates. Compliance is changing that. You're changing how the client's business operates. And that's going to require new tools, new skills, new capabilities. There's still going to be nothing better than a manual assessment of sitting down and talking to the business owners, the board, the president, the managers, the individual department leads, the supervisors, whoever it is that has the knowledge of how does the business operate, how does data flow through the operations, where is the data held, where is it stored, how is it manipulated, what are the physical world compliance restrictions, such as secured access? Do we have to have man traps in the building? Do we have to have keyed entries with badges? There's a lot of things there that are just, there is not a single point solution. There's not a single tool that you're going to go purchase that's magically going to let you start delivering these things. Now, they're going to help you, they absolutely will help you. There are plenty of automated tools and platforms and software solutions out there that can help with collecting evidence and keeping track of it and sorting it nicely and mapping it against your, yes, I'm doing this one thing, so it maps against the NIST cybersecurity framework, and it also maps against the ISO 27002 controls or the um, high trust or the CIS controls. There are great tools and platforms out there that will help you do that mapping and keeping track of it, but it's not going to do the initial work for you of somebody sitting down, spending the time and the effort to find the answers, which is one challenge. It's just discovery, finding out the things you need to know. What regulations is this client subject to? What do they have to do statewide? What do they have to do federal wise? If you're in the EU, you have the NIS2 stuff that's supposed to be transcribed into law on, I believe it's October 7th of 2024. Not every EU country is going to hit that deadline. Well, you now have a EU-wide directive saying that you should be doing these things concerning cybersecurity and proper risk management. There's not rules on the books for it yet in your member state, and you're kind of left. Well, what should I be doing? How should I be approaching this? And it kind of comes back to no matter what compliance you're going to pursue, what type of pressure is being applied from the top, from the side? Is it the business wanting compliance because it's going to make them more competitive for the contracts they're pursuing? Or is it being dictated from on high because they are in a regulated industry and there are laws that dictate how they're supposed to handle data or behave? Um, all of those reasons are still going to boil down to, well, it doesn't matter why. you still have to collect the data. You still have to understand the information about the client, and you have to make the proposals that's going to bring them into alignment with whatever chosen compliance is they need to become in alignment with. And it won't change that part that you have to do it, but it will change how you have to go about it depending on the regulation or the compliance you're pursuing. Because if you are pursuing, if you're here in the US and you provide support to local law enforcement agencies, well, then you have to worry about CJIS. If you're providing services to a municipality in North Carolina or in, I believe it's Pennsylvania, you have to have the knowledge about the laws and regulations that say, guess what? If a ransomware event happens, your hands are kind of tied as an MSP. You start having to involve the fusion center and maybe even escalating things up to the point to where a declaration of emergency has to be declared by the governor in order for a ransom to be paid if that's the only solution for a given scenario. So there are tons of those small individual moving parts that are going to change from compliance to compliance, regulation to regulation. And that's really one of the first challenges as an MSP is saying, which one of these can we handle? And that's back to
Yeah.
that self assessment. You have to have that honest, the goodness conversation with yourself, with your staff, with the resources you have available to say, can we do this? Because
Right.
there's some times where the answer will honestly be no, right now we can't. We don't have enough people. We don't have the skills. We don't have the experience. Okay, cool. Well, then we're going to miss out on this opportunity if we don't do something. We need to move on it. Or it's like, yes, we can handle it. Great. Don't just drop it in the hand and don't drop it in the laps of your current team. Just dropping compliance on top of your current teams and what they're currently doing, you know, unless they are already sitting around for half of the day doing absolutely nothing, it's just
Which I
going to
don't
make,
think so.
yeah, it's going to make things worse than better.
Okay, so I have two more questions, three more questions. Um, Going back to your comment around MSPs want to get into this. If they decide they do their internal assessment that they have the opportunity there with their customers, but they know or they recognize right now that they're not in a position to be able to deliver them yet. What are their options?
So there's always the, divide and conquer. There is absolutely ways for you to bring in the capabilities that you're going to need to deliver on compliance for certain verticals. Um, I know we've had this conversation a lot, many times over the years, and it doesn't feel like we have to have it as much as we used to. But don't be afraid of other MSPs. Don't be afraid of
Say
MSSPs. Don't
partnering.
be afraid of outsourced SOC services. Um, they're there to provide specifically what they're going to provide. They're not going to have an interest in, an MSSP is not going to have any interest in stealing your client away from you because, well, they're not going to want to sit there and answer the help desk tickets for printers not printing, for an end user needing assistance because their Outlook client's font size has been changed and they can't change it back for some reason. That's not what they're there to do. They want no part of that. So bringing in outside resources such as an MSSP that is properly staffed to provide services into a particular vertical or aligned to a particular framework or to a compliance item. And that lets you step back, don't do the busy work because a lot of long-term support of compliance is it's not that it's not important, but it's a lot of busy work. And that's just fine to offload that. That's what outsourcing services is for. Um, and then you can focus your energy and your attention back into more of the business consultancy, business steering part of compliance, of you know having the bandwidth and the time and the room for whoever's going to handle this within your MSP to breathe. to not be stressed out and have their calendars booked 8 hours a day every day of the week so that they can sit down with a client, have a nice lunch, have the QBR, talk about the plans that are coming up, and you're not sitting there panicking because you're trying to figure out how you're going to make up for the lost productivity of that staff member because they weren't able to be off somewhere working a ticket, cranking out hours for you. Now,
Yeah. And I think that's a really good point to say. I know it's kind of a leading question, about how important it is to be having the conversation with your customers. And just because you may not have that internal capability to deliver CaaS today, it's important to have that conversation with your customers. Find the opportunity that is there. Don't leave it just sitting there on the table, but go partner with someone until you can get that skill sets. Because if you're not having that conversation, as we always say, another MSP is going to come in and have that conversation, and next thing you know, your customer might be churning. So, yeah, I definitely, if you don't have those internal skill sets today, co-partnering is not a dirty word.
no,
Don't
no,
look at
and
MSSPs as being your competition.
yeah, and there's that important. And again, back to the self assessment. I can't overemphasize how important it is to get through that first early stages of figuring out, can we handle this and can we do it. Um, Something that goes along with that for me is making sure that along the line, as you're doing this evaluation and you're deciding to, are we going to partner? Are we going to consume an outside service? Or are we going to do it ourselves? To be honest. Don't lie to yourself. Don't, it's
True.
great to have those projections out into the horizon and those aspirations, but there's simple things you can ask yourself sometimes. Like, first is like, are you a 24/7 operation? If you don't have a 24/7 SOC service, it's going to be really hard to deliver on a lot of compliances. Then you have to kind of make that, yes, we're going to have to figure out some way, somehow we're going to do 24/7. And then it's like, well, I don't work 24/7 right now. We're working, 9 to 5 business hours and somebody's on call at night. I need more people. How many people is it going to take me to do this? And it's it's just napkin math, but it kind of helps highlight really the challenge you're up against sometimes, to say, well, I'm going to need 24/7 services. I'm going to need 24/7 security services. I'm going to have two individuals on the clock at all times, staring at a SOC dashboard, at an orchestration dashboard, and at an XDR, MDR dashboard to monitor what's happening in the environments and being able to respond and triage and isolate systems and perform remediations 24/7, 365. That's two guys on shift at all times. That's 17,000 hours a year, roughly. Um, where are you going to find the payroll for that? Do you have the payroll for that? And then it's like, yeah, sure, I've got the payroll for it, or I don't have the payroll for it. Then it's the next question of, well, what kind of client base do I need to support that type of a compliance play? I can't just sell this to one client. They're not going to be able to pay for two guys on every shift unless they're, humongous and can afford it. And at that point, you know, you were probably under bidding into an opportunity that you probably couldn't deliver on. So quickly arriving at the answers of, can we or can't we, can doing something internally, because MSPs, lots of technical people, engineers. We love challenges. We love black boxes. Give us a problem to figure out, and we'll sit there and burn 5, 6, 7 hours on it, finally get it fixed, and then turn around and charge the client for 2 hours. I see that so often, and it's honorable. It's great. It gives you that satisfying, I figured it out. But it's not conducive to running a business, and it's definitely not conducive to running a business in where your offering is compliance to established frameworks that have established timelines and expectations and SLAs. So that honest internal assessment, I know I keep coming back to it, but it's going to be so important if you're just getting started into this.
Yeah, and I think that's so critical. So obviously the internal assessment, any other challenges that MSPs really need to consider, as they're contemplating going to market with compliance.
Right. So it's for one is look at your client base. Who are they? Is there a commonality already that exists? Or are you already delivering to specific verticals or regulated entities? Go find what's
ICP,
required of them.
ideal client profile. I
ICP.
always joke, I said, if I had a dollar for every time I used ICP in a day, I could have retired from Enable by now. So thank you for bringing it into this podcast. ICP, ideal client profile.
Exactly. And your ICP can either be, build it off of based off of who you're currently supporting and you're good at it, or build that new ICP based on what you're desiring you want to get into. But, you know, once you've got that figured out, you have the commonalities, you know which framework you're going to have to align to, focus on the one, build out that program, get it polished, move on to the next one. Unless you have a lot of staff and a lot of external money coming in to support the motion, it's usually not a good idea to start a compliance as a service program and say, "Yep, we're going to do these 7 different compliances out the gate." Um, it's just,
That's not even manageable, like
it's
realistically.
not.
Okay.
And then also educating clients, because you will have clients in that chosen vertical that you're going to decide that yes, we will handle compliance for them. You will have clients that have absolutely no interest whatsoever in pursuing that compliance because they've never been burned. They've never been slapped on the back of the hand and been told, no, you're
Never
doing the
happened
right
to
thing.
me.
Yeah.
I'm
Um,
too small.
yeah, I'm too small. I don't have anything of value. Um, and then there's also the challenge of and I always talk about don't pre-object. You talk about don't pre-object on behalf of your clients. Whenever you get into compliance, it's even more of a cardinal sin to object, because you are now telling, you are practically saying, I am making a decision about compliance on behalf of my client without them having any input in that decision. And that, you know, who made this, whenever, if and when something happens, and it's like, well, who made the decision? You don't want to be the one saying, I made the decision because I thought
Because
we
I
were
was
going to
afraid to
cheat.
talk to you about it.
Yeah. So you have to get past that. Also, you have to start thinking about skilling up training, professional training for individuals, not only internally for yourself, but also for your clients. If they are, if we start getting into CMMC, cybersecurity maturity model, cybersecurity maturity model certification. If you get into it, well, now you're dealing with controlled, unclassified information is one of the main things you have to deal with. That's NIST 800-171. Um, does your client have an assigned data officer, a classification officer, who is handling the process of making sure that that CUI is properly tagged, documented, sorted, and placed where it needs to be? Is that something you're going to take over as the MSP? Is that something you're going to help the client figure out their internal staffing needs there? And the professional training that goes into filling those kinds of roles, or upskilling individuals to be able to handle those responsibilities. Um, Having strong communications with channels with your clients, so that's your QBRs. But also, when you start getting into compliance, and it has to be kind of a little bit more open communication, in the sense that you can't think of yourself as simply the MSP that gets the luxury of sitting down at the table during the QBR and giving your opinion. It's starting to be, no, you're starting to get closer to that VCISO or fractional CISO type position, where when the business is having any conversation about the way the business is going to move forward or change, or how they're going to make alterations to how they produce a product, you need communication channels into that as well, because if they decide to start manufacturing a new widget, which is going to involve a whole new engineering team that's going to need access to that CUI. You need to be a part of that conversation and process, because they normally, most of the time, if they just do it themselves, something's going to go wrong, because they're going to choose the path of least resistance, the easy way of doing it, not the way that is aligned with compliance and security best practices.
Right.
And then,
All right. Oh,
oh,
sorry.
I was
Keep
just
going
going to end it out there with and it's an ongoing thing. A lot of managed
with
service,
anything.
yeah, a lot of managed service that you deliver, you can automate a lot of it. It's not necessarily set it and forget it, but it's a lot of setting it up, probably properly configuring it, setting alerts, monitoring for events, and responding when needed. Compliance is a much more proactive process. You have to be in there, I don't want to say daily, but you need to have mechanisms and processes in place to let you know for configuration drift, for users having more permissions than they had the day before, a user being given access to a new resource, even though they've not changed job descriptions. Why does this finance individual now have access to drafting materials from the architecture department? Those are the things that start coming into purview when you start doing compliance, and it can be a significantly larger amount of manpower and labor that goes into delivering that service, but that also represents an opportunity for increased margins and charging more.
Yeah, exactly. So last question that I have, I know you work with a lot of MSPs, extensive knowledge on what they're doing from a security and compliance management perspective. Key lessons. If I'm an MSP listening to us today, have this chat, and they are seriously thinking of getting into it, some key lessons that maybe you've learned from your discussions with previous MSPs that they can be sure that they think about and consider as they move forward with that.
I think one of the more common things that I've run across over the past couple of years is an MSP making a decision that they're going to pursue compliance as a service and dropping it on a person to implement the program. Um, because, in all honesty, if you drop it on somebody internally and that person can actually handle this and succeed, I would have to ask the question, why are they working for you and not doing it on their own out somewhere else, because they could make so much more than what you're paying them. So be realistic about the scope and the amount of work and effort that's going to go into building out a compliance as a service program. You can't drop it just in one individual's person's lap and expect them to handle it all and not have to reach into other parts of the company and start pulling in resources, because in order for them to be able to execute on this, they have to be able to start changing the way your business operates, and they need to be empowered to be able to start making these changes. And if you're a business owner, if you're more on the operations side and you're going to hire somebody or put somebody in this role, really have the expectation, have the understanding of how much power you have to give this person in order for them to do this job. um it's not going to work if you give somebody the task, they don't get to pull in any other resources from the rest of the company, and you're just expecting them to come back with for you, drop a folder of templated forms on your desk and say, well, here's our program.
And a bag
It's
of
not
money.
going to work. So that's one of the challenges, realistic expectations on what you're asking the individual to do if you're going to somebody and asking them to implement this on your behalf. If you're the next is the challenge of, well, we're going to, somebody that's in one of those operation manager positions or a service delivery manager or even an owner position that wants to take this on and tackle it. Now, understand that it's a new thing. It is not going to be the same as the services you've been delivering. You will have to change your outlook. You're going to have to be prepared to change your teams, change your reporting hierarchies. Um, you may have to change up even your managed service agreements. You may have to re-strip them down and completely rebuild them again.
That's a big one.
Yeah, so you have to be prepared. This is going to be a lot of work for you to have to do internally before you ever even get to the point of a client signing a contract and then you repeating all of that work for them. And just think about it. If you're sitting there thinking internally that, you know what, it's going to take us 2 months to do this for ourselves internally, 3 months internally, well, realize that you're saying it's that long and and intimately understand your business and how it operates. Now go do this for another business that you only know about half of how it really operates. You're already you're
Sure.
starting off with a handicap. You're going to have to play catch up, and you have to have the liquidity. You have to have the finances in a good place so that while you are putting this non insignificant amount of time and effort into this, that it's not threatening the viability of the rest of the MSP. That's
Right.
another big challenge that that kind of gets a lot of people whenever they first start this, and it's because a lot of them, when a lot of MSPs, whenever they first start this, the first thing they pursue is, well, we need the SOC, we need the 24/7 operations, and there are many MSPs out there that have started that path and had to just cut it and reverse course halfway through the process because simply was not enough money to continue to pay for the licensing and the people to be able to do that because there wasn't the client base to support it. And
Right.
that brings us back earlier to the things about don't be afraid to outsource and partner.
Right. And again, I kind of equate this to, several years ago when I used to be the account manager for the copier companies that were coming into the managed services space. They have a wonderful base of copier clients selling, managed print, and they wanted to obviously leverage those client relationships and start implementing managed services. And so many times I'd have this brand new partner join me, and they put the whole managed services initiative on one person's plate. He was responsible for learning all the technology, but he also had to spin up all the processes and the procedures and deal with packaging and pricing and go to market. And he wasn't empowered, or they weren't empowered to be able to really go to other departments because the business owner kind of threw it on that one person and said, well, it's on you. So this is really like going back to our cultural discussion. This is a full-on cultural shift as you're moving into delivering CaaS.
Yep. And sometimes the cultural shift may not be achievable. Sometimes it may be a part of, if you want to pursue this, the better option may be to split off those operations into a separate, an umbrella organization, an LLC, DBA, however you want to break it off, so it can be its own separate business unit that's going to function. And if it suffers, if it goes under, if something impacts it, that's fine. It doesn't affect the rest of the MSP.
Right.
And that can also kind of at the same time solve that cultural problem of, no, it's a new business unit with new individuals in it, with new directives and new obligations, and they can do what they need to do there without worrying about upsetting the apple cart for everybody
Right.
else.
Right. Fantastic. I cannot tell you how excited I have been for this conversation. Thank you, Lewis, for sharing all of your insights and musings when it comes to compliance management. For anyone that's interested in learning more about security, compliance management, risk management, all of the above, be sure to connect with Lewis on LinkedIn. Make sure you're following him on LinkedIn. Check out our events page at enable.com. Find out when Lewis is delivering his boot camps again. It's Cybersecurity Awareness Month. Him and I are pretty much every day delivering boot camps on security and compliance. And then also be sure to register for his monthly office hour sessions as well, and bring your questions to him. Because a big point I want to make is for all of the head nerd boot camps, office hours. You do not need to be an Enable MSP, Enable partner to attend and participate. All head nerd events are open to any MSP who's really looking at improving and advancing their business forward. So thank you everyone for listening, watching us today. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss out on future podcast episodes, but also make sure to go back and listen to past episodes of Beyond the Horizon podcast for more great conversations with industry experts. Thank you, Lewis. Everyone, take care.
Been a pleasure, Steph. Thank you.